Good morning and welcome, everyone. Some of you might be coming from Gordon's session. Some of you might be joining anew today. We're excited to have you all here. We'll give we'll give it a couple minutes to let everyone in before we get started. We've got an exciting session for you all today. And I know that I said good morning. I realized that it's technically 12 on the Eastern in the Eastern time. I know I'm over here in the Pacific. We're probably all scattered in between. Hi, Warren. Feel free to use the chat box as you all enter and throughout. Doesn't have to be a question, although we welcome questions at any point. But if you just want to say a little bit about what you're excited about today or anything, feel free to chat it up in there. I'm gonna let Carrie introduce herself, but as folks are joining in, just want to welcome you all to Powering Connected Campuses. Carrie Phillips, Dr. Carrie Phillips, I apologize, will be leading this presentation today, and I am really excited about. I got to take a sneak peek at her deck. And we chatted a little bit before, and I know that she's got a lot of exciting ideas, and I know that she's always just a really great presenter. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you all are looking forward to it. And Carrie, this is our first, other than Gordon, our CEO's welcome keynote, but this is our first session of the summit. So really excited for you to be kicking us off today. And looks like we're about a minute or so in. I'll let you just kind of say hello to everyone.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and getting to talk about powering connected campuses and how we build collaboration across all of our teams. And so, Christian, if it's good with you, do you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Yeah, I think now's the
Okay.
perfect time, Carrie. And I know that you're going to be leading the deck today. So if you have any technical problems, let me know. But I think you've got it.
All righty. Well, this sounds great. Well, I'm going to start my share now. And so I think we are in a great spot. And first off, thank you all so much for joining us. This is Powering Connected Campuses. A little bit about me. I love to tell people that I'm part creative and part analyst, but fully curious. And so let me tell you what that means. Creative, I love aesthetic, I love design. But on the analytics side, I love a spreadsheet. I love data informed decisions. In a Myers-Briggs world, I am on the nth degree a feeler. My husband will never build a house with me ever again because I felt the doorknobs. So, after I finished my doctorate, I took a new job within about 2 months of each other. And so every bit of my professional identity is Carrie changed. And I was really struggling with who I was and what I wanted to do and what I wanted my impact to be. And so as I was talking to different people about that, they encouraged me to just write. And so I started carrying on about higher education, marketing, and leadership on my website and carryon.com. And that has really become my way to provide service to our community. I love college football. I'm a puppy mama to Eleanor Bell. She's named Eleanor after Eleanor Roosevelt because we want her to be a strong, confident puppy. She's named Bell because all Southerners have two names, and so we couldn't just have an Eleanor. And she hates college football because that means she has costume changes for all of our different teams. And then I'm also a creator on the Enrollify network, where I get to talk even more about higher ed marketing and leadership. So, enough about me. You're here for Powering Connected Campuses. And so, I want to talk you through our agenda. We're going to start with introductions today. Then, I want to talk about the role of the CMCO, that Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, what all that entails outside of marketing and communications. And I want to give you 10 strategies of how to build that collaboration, and then close out with time for question and conversation. So with that, I want to get to meet you all. It feels very isolating being one side of this. So in the chat, go ahead and say hello. Let us know where you're joining, what institution you're with. Would love to get to meet who's on the other side of the Zoom screen. So that chat is open. I hope you'll say hello. Hey, Rhonda, we're so excited to have you from SUNY Adirondack. Thanks for being here. Yes, lots of folks, Vermont, Georgia Tech, Claremore, Oklahoma, Rogers State. Oh, I know some folks at Rogers, Valdosta, UC Riverside. Yeah, lots of great folks coming in. Thank you so much for being here and taking time for your own professional development today. So I hope that this is really meaningful and impactful. Yeah, lots of great folks across the country. We are coast to coast today for sure. So what does a CMO actually do? And I want to be honest, when I took my first job as that CMO title, I thought, oh, I'm going to do all this great marketing and comm strategy. And I do a lot of that. But there's so much else that I do that I didn't fully expect. And so let me share you a few of those things because I think those are really important. First is a whole lot of budget. I spend a ton of time getting purchase orders, getting requisitions, making sure that what we have allocated, we're spending and we're forecasting our spend correctly. Budget is so important as a leader to be the tool to achieve your goals and your objectives. So I spend a ton of time in the numbers. That's good because I love that spreadsheet side of my brain, and so it definitely gets that work out. In the last 6 months, I have hired, when we finish our hiring, I will have hired right at 5 new employees. And so I'm spending a ton of time working with HR on getting the positions approved, getting the job descriptions, interviewing people and talking with them about their experiences. And that's all before they get here. Then once they are on our campus, it's making sure that they have a really good onboarding, that they understand all those things about the small ticky things like how to get on the Wi-Fi or where to go to get your keys. Those aren't the most fun and exciting things, but man, that sure is important. And then making sure they know the institution, making sure they know that context that we just pick up over time. So I spend a ton of time in the onboarding space. I also spend a little bit of time as a therapist. Part of our job as leaders is to really understand our teams and understand how our teams work. And so I have some people that are really driven and motivated by different things. And so it's important for me to understand how people function, how people work, how people like to work, so that I can do a good job as a leader adapting my style to what they need. I talk a lot about situational leadership and the idea that we adapt our leadership style based on the task and the personality of the people. And this is a really good reason for that is sometimes, it's a big task that's really important. And so we have to manage it one way, whereas other times we can really focus on what that person needs to grow and develop. And I love situational leadership, but it forces me sometimes to act a little bit like a therapist and kind of figure out what people need to help them be successful. And honestly, there are some days I feel like a referee too. Sometimes we have departments that aren't aligned on something. Sometimes we have team members that aren't aligned on something. And so I feel like some days I play referee. And then we have a ton of events. Events are a great thing on our campus. It's a great way to bring people in to the work that's happening. And so some days I spend a lot of time helping plan events and making sure that every bit of that event planning, every bit of the materials, the talking points, that they all tell that cohesive story that helps elevate the perception of our university. So the long story is that I do a lot of other duties as assigned, things that aren't technically part of my job in a true job description, but I'll be honest, they make the day different, they make every day different. But there's something about being in that messy middle that I think also sets me up really nice for collaboration. That's the idea of relationship, that I'm working with people on a day and day basis, building partnership and collaboration. So I don't know if you know this, but higher education is a little siloed. We have different divisions on our campuses. We have the academic division, we have the student affairs or student life division, we have the advancement division. We have all these different divisions on our campus, and sometimes we don't always talk together. And we even sometimes do that in our own marketing shops. We may have the comms team and the creative services team and the marketing team and the web team. So we even do it to ourselves some days. And what happens sometimes with silos is that it creates duplication. So we're doing double effort. Sometimes we're competing against ourselves. I've been in situations that we were running an ad for something and another department on campus was running an ad. So we were betting on each other for keywords and for ad placement. So we were, doing some duplication, competing against each other. And the reality is, when that happens, everybody gets so execution focused that we lose the big strategy. And so, one of my favorite things to do is to take out those silos and to really do that by building collaboration. And so, when you can create that culture of collaboration on your campus, several things happen. One, you can have incredible growth. Two, you can have incredible fundraising momentum and campaign growth because, after all, most institutions are either in a campaign or they're in a silent phase of a campaign about to be. And then finally, you can have that really good media visibility. And I want to tell you a little bit about UA Little Rock. This week marks 4 years that I've been here. And when I started here, I would meet with anybody on campus that was willing to talk to me. I wanted to hear what their successes were, what their challenges were, what was working well, what wasn't. And so I did this great tour of campus. And when I got to our admissions partners, one of the things they said is, we really want to start meeting regularly. We don't, it's kind of ad hoc. We do things very sporadically, and we think we could be better. Well, I'm really proud of us. We have worked together to do exactly that. This fall, if we have a good year, doesn't even have to be a great year, just a good year, we are on track to have doubled the freshman class size in 4 years. And that happens because of collaboration. When I started, we were also talking with our advancement colleagues about launching a campaign. We were a few months away from launch, and our team got involved and helped the launch go really well. But then we also set up a cadence to have a continual drumbeat of folks donating to that campaign, folks succeeding, and created this momentum groundswell. And because of that really good partnership together, we're going to close the campaign in December. Right now, we have 9 million left out of our 250 million goal. So we feel really good that we've got 9 million left to go. We're pacing ahead of schedule, so feel really good about that. And finally, when I started, I was told you won't get media coverage. And if you tell me something, I love to be that person that says, let's see about that. And that's kind of how I took this approach. And so I really got busy building relationships with our media partners, getting to know them, getting to know what stories resonated, getting to know the angles that were important to them and their readers, and how one story might look very different across multiple audiences and multiple media partners. And since I started with just one of our print partners, we've had a 280% increase in positive news. So we've been able to do all of those things. We're seeing enrollment growth, we're seeing campaign growth, we're seeing media success. And that's really because we got to know our campus. We got to know who were the things that were happening, the great stories. And so when we had really compelling stories combined with a really important relationship building, we were set up for success. And so we've seen that. So that's kind of the background. I want to give you my 10 strategies, and I want to be really candid with these. These are, I think, things that are really important for a collaboration. I don't know that anything I'm going to tell you is groundbreaking that you may not have heard before, but what I do hope to do is give you some practical ways to do that so that you're not just hearing the strategy and going, yeah, I've heard that before, but I'm giving you some actual tips and tools that you can plug in. And so with that, let's get started, okay? So the first strategy is build key relationships. And the key relationships that I think about are admissions, advancement, athletics, and academics. I call these the 4 A's. And with our team, these are folks that we meet with every single week. They get kind of a white glove collaboration with our team. And so what that allows us to do is to really get to know them, know their needs, and understand the work. And so the first tip that I would have about building that key partnership is get there early. When we meet every week, if our meeting starts at 10 o'clock, we're there at 10 minutes before 10. And what happens is, as people are coming into that room, we hear about Becca's upcoming cruise, or we hear about Sarah's new baby, or we hear about so-and-so is getting a puppy. And we start to humanize the people, right? And as we hear all of these personal tidbits about their lives, and they hear about the things happening in our lives, all of a sudden it's really easy to build collaboration and to work with people when you know them as humans, when you know them as people. The other strategy is an agenda. We've all been in that meeting, right? Where you walk into a meeting, there's been an agenda, and then somebody has like thrown something in and you kind of feel taken aback or blindsided, right? It doesn't feel good. And so our goal is that should never happen. So what we do is we put together an agenda. Everybody has access to the same Google Doc. They're able to share that agenda. They're able to add things to it so that everybody at any point in time knows what we're talking about when we walk in that room. And that's really important because it helps keep everybody on the same page. It helps make sure no one gets surprised in a not good way. But then the other part of this that's really important is that we make sure that we send a wrap-up conversation. You know, when you're building a new collaboration or a new environment, there's low trust. It's not because anyone had any bad intent, but it's just you don't know each other. And so sometimes when that happens, you hear different things from different people in the room. So I could say the sky is blue and you might hear it a little bit differently. And it really happens with action items. And so it's really important that in that wrap up after action meeting that who's doing what is spelled out, what are the tasks, what are the next steps. And then if there's something that got misunderstood, we catch it right away and it doesn't sit an entire week before that next meeting. And what happens is the Marcom folks and the admissions folks over time really start to have a shared purpose. And Virginia, I'm going to get to your question in just a second. But part of what we see is that there's this shared purpose that we're all working towards the same thing. It's no longer the Marcom goal and it's no longer the admissions goal or the advancement goal. We're all in the same kind of path. And we have, shared goals on the admission side. We have enrollment goals and marketing claims our role is part of those too. We have comms pieces that help map up to that, but we all at the end of the day are working towards the same goal. And what that does is that changes us from a short order cook that's wanting those eggs scattered, smothered, covered to somebody that's a strategic partner that has really good buy-in, really good insight into what is happening, and we're a valued member of that team. So the other thing that we do is what we have a cross-functional team. So within the Marcom team here at UA Little Rock, we have our marketing folks and our creative services folks. We've got our web team and we've got our comms team. But then we have what we call cross-functional teams. And so for each of those A's, those four A's that I was talking about, we have a member from each of our own Marcom teams that goes to that meeting. So we've got somebody from the comms space in the house, somebody from marketing and creative services in that conversation. We've got somebody from web in that conversation. And what that allows us to do is a couple of things. One, if I'm out and I miss a meeting, there are three other people that have been in that conversation. And so we keep progress moving. It also signals that it's really important, right? If you show up to a meeting and there are 3 to 4 members of the Marcom team, that signals Marcom values this and that it's important. And that's a great first step to build collaboration. What we also try to do is make sure that we get really deep in that vertical. Having that consistent person every single time helps the folks on our team that are comms experts or marketing experts. All of a sudden, they get to learn about alumni, or they get to learn really deep about admissions, or they get to go really deep and understand athletics. And so having that insight knowledge helps them to be a better partner and be better at being that strategic partner that we're asked to be. And so one of the things that we do within our own team to help promote this is we have blown up our staff meeting. So we no longer in a staff meeting sit around the room and talk about what's on everybody's calendar. Instead, we use that time to do key updates, and then each of our teams has a set meeting time internally that they can prep for that external meeting with our campus partners. So our athletics team is meeting, looking at their action items, working through things so that when they meet with athletics next week, they're in a good spot. And we have found that that really helps keep us all focused and allows for that deeper dive into the strategy work. So the next thing that I really harp on and that I think is really important is continual assessment. We never arrive, we can always be better. And one of my favorite ways to do that is called stop, start, continue. So it's what are the things after every project, we do this internally and we do it with our partners, and then our partners do it back with us. What are things we should stop in that project? They didn't work well. What are things that we should start? They were great ideas, things we should add in the future, and what worked really well that we don't want to lose. So stop, start, continue. And this helps turn culture very quickly because all of a sudden it's not an attack on so and so didn't do a good job or so and so needs to do better, but instead we're focused on overall, here's the goal we're trying to get to and what are ideas that can help us. And when you get really good at this and you start doing this regularly as a project is happening, you start seeing, oh, in next time's iteration, we should think about X thing or we should think about Y. And so you start creating this culture where you're always ideating and always looking to improve. So this is one of my favorite things. I also think it's really important to get out and go walk campus. Seeing what's happening on campus is a great way to know what's happening and to build partnership. We have a Starbucks on campus, and I love to go to the Starbucks and sit there. I was there the other week, and in came a donor, and he and I ended up having a great conversation and catching up on something that wasn't even on my radar, but I was like, oh, I need to talk to him while he's there. That Starbucks is a great place to see other people on campus, and build those partnerships and those relationships. If you're like me and your day sometimes is scheduled meeting to meeting to meeting, sometimes I take my meetings at the Starbucks. And so I can get things done and I can still get the benefit of being out on campus and seeing people and being able to build those partnerships. I also think it's important to go to events. We go to I like to go to student events and see what our students are doing. Our student government president asked me to go to a forum, and it's a student forum. They do it every year. And I left that forum. I was one of the speakers, and I left with three story ideas, three things I had no idea were happening on campus, but because I was at that event, people kind of opened up and shared. We also volunteer at our events for our key partners. So when, Advancement has a great event on their side of the house, we'll go help. Transfer orientation is in May, and we've got folks volunteering for that. We go to the athletic events and help volunteer. When we show up at our partners' things, all of a sudden it builds interaction and it builds trust, and people are willing to be better collaborators. And in turn, they come to our events. They sign up for the things we're doing and want to be part of that work as well. Okay, so I want to talk about this one, and this is this idea that we have to be good communicators. In fact, we have to over communicate. I want to tell you about an example from a prior institution. I was, getting feedback all the time that the deans didn't feel like we were doing enough for them. We needed to do more. We needed to do more. We were doing so much, but the reality was the deans didn't see it. And if they didn't see it, it means it didn't actually happen in their mind. And I was, frustrated and groaning about this at home one evening. And my husband's like, well, why don't you just tell them? And after I got over the fact that I was annoyed that he had a really good idea, the reality is he was right. We needed to just tell people what we were doing. And so what I started doing is every Friday afternoon, I would send those deans a note and say, hey, this past week, here are the news things that we pitched. Here are the marketing campaigns that you were part of. Here is the commercial that featured your student. Here is, the alumni success story we talked about. I didn't change any of the actual work. No work changed. All I did was added a weekly email that took me about 30 to 45 minutes to put together. That was it. But what I found happened is a 180. The deans thought I was their best friend all of a sudden. I was a complete advocate for them. And the only thing I did differently was I just communicated what I was doing. So I think we sometimes forget, we get in that we're so busy that we forget to slow down and tell people what we're doing. And so that one simple thing really has resonated with me about how important communication is. So let me give you a couple of other examples. I think it means to just pick up the phone. So often we get busy and it's easy to fire out that email, but a phone call, we can hear tone, we can hear intent. And so phone calls are so important if you need to talk through something. I love the idea that we just pick up the phone and call somebody and we can work through it together, usually with a better outcome. We can always document it if we need to and follow up in an email, but it's so good to just hop on the phone and have that communication where we can hear somebody's tone, or even better, invite them to the coffee shop and have that cup of coffee on your campus and get to see them face to face. So that's when communication is working well. But I want to give you an example of what happens when it doesn't work well because I think it's a really stark comparison. So at a prior university, we were going through budget cuts. There were likely going to have to be some layoffs. It was a tough time, right? And so I was in a retreat across campus. It was an all-day retreat. And I got out of the retreat that day and I picked up my phone and I had about 18 missed calls and probably 8 or 9 voicemails from my team. I was like, what on earth? Well, it turns out somebody had come over to our office unannounced, had walked into one of the vacant offices and whipped out that measuring tape and started measuring the office space. My team, in the absence of communication, because there was none, they went to a really dark place. They went to fear. And in low trust times, that is exactly what happens. People go to fear. And so by the time I got on the phone with folks and figured out what was happening, our team had really kind of gone to this place of we were about to all be fired. Marketing and comms was going to be outsourced because they didn't have anything else to put in place of that fear. So they just kept adding to that fear. It turns out that it was just somebody that they had a professor that needed to meet with a student that had a very unique accommodation, and they thought that office might be a great spot for them to have this meeting. It turned out to be nothing, but we didn't communicate that. And so it always has stuck with me. If that's a really good example of what happens when we don't communicate well and people are nervous or people are fearing, it can go really to a dark place very quickly. My other strategy and a happier note of communication is the idea of awards. We submit for a lot of awards at UA Little Rock, and I think that's important, A, to help show our expertise and help build that. But it's also a strategy around partnership and building collaboration. We reach out to that partner when we win an award for, say, an admissions view book or a print piece for advancement, and we reach out to them and say, hey, thank you so much for being a great partner. Together, we won this gold award or we won this silver award. And, we couldn't have done that without your partnership. And we let that team be part of that award winning moment with us. And all of a sudden, what happens is the next time we have a harebrained idea or we want to push the envelope on something and do something maybe a little bit more progressive or out of the box, all of a sudden we have a willing partner. They trust that we're going to do something, that we know what we're doing. They trust that we're going to take care of them and steward them along the way. And hopefully together we can win an award for it. And using awards has been a great tool to really help build that partnership. I suspect many of you, much like me, I'm guilty of this. I've said so many times, we need to make data-driven decisions. We need to get your data so that we can look at that and really make some informed decisions. We've all said it, right? You know, if you haven't, I'm surprised. I have been guilty of it many times. And sometimes we're met with like, why do you want to see my data? What do you need in there? People get scary about that, right? And I get it. So what we've done is tried to flip that on our head. So instead of asking for that data first, we've said, here's our marketing data. Here's the cost per click we're seeing. Here's the impression rate we're seeing. Here's where we're above benchmark. Here's where we've got to maybe do a little more work because it's not performing quite the way we thought. And all of a sudden, when we offer that olive branch and share that data and are very honest about what we're seeing, like we're killing it over here, we've got a little bit of work over here, this area in the middle, we think we can optimize our spend and maybe get it a little bit tighter. When we're very candid with what we're seeing, all of a sudden that opens up trust. And then when we ask, hey, could we get that list of folks? Or could we get access to that back end of that CRM? Or could we get that enrollment plan? All of a sudden it's not as scary because we're being really forthright with what we're doing. And so getting that back doesn't feel quite as scary. And I think that's something that we really have to be intentional about. Another communication example. Sometimes our role in building collaboration is seeing and connecting dots that other people aren't going to see. It's that idea that marketing and comms is a change agent. So this is not my campus, but this is what my campus felt like in late January this year. In Arkansas, we got a coat of ice and then we got about 4 to 5 inches of snow. And this is what it felt like. We shut down for an entire week. We don't have the infrastructure. It's a whole thing. And so part of what happened during this is we had, right before we closed for a week of snow, we had sent an invitation to our campus print shop to be printed to go out for our major fundraising event for alumni. Well, the print shop is like, yep, we're snowed in. Alumni is like, we've sent the invitation. Our team was the only team that could see the dots of how this lost week might impact the timeline of getting it done, might impact the amount of time we needed the print shop to be able to execute. So we reached out to alumni and said, okay, when is your drop date in terms of getting this into mailboxes that you have? Because we've lost a week and we need to work through this. At the same time, we reached out to our colleagues in the print side of the house and said, okay, here's the current invitation. It's a little complex. How long is it going to take you once we're back? And we looked at that and said, okay, we've got enough window, we can make this work. Our plan B is if that invitation was going to take longer than getting it behind that ideal date from alumni, we were then going to go back to alumni and say, okay, you've got a couple of choices here. We can take this really complex thing and simplify it so you get a better print date, or it's going to take a little bit longer, but you have this more impactful piece. Weather was outside of everybody's control, but our job as that collaboration partner was to figure out how do we map the best outcome here. And so we did all of that. The invitation, we were able to get it done. The print shop, burned the midnight oil. We helped partner on some pieces of that, got multiple parts of it running simultaneously. We got it out within the timeline. But what we also did is we built a lot of trust. Our advancement team doesn't know all of the print mechanics of how that works. And so having us as their partner help advocate and help keep that moving really built a ton of trust that, we were communicating back and forth. We were trying to find a happy balance here. Nobody could manage snow, but we didn't just go, oh, well, it is what it is. We took a proactive step and helped communicate where we were and where we were going. And I think that was a great example of sometimes we have to be that dot connector that nobody else sees. Okay, so number 6, we're halfway there. Meetings matter. I hate meetings that could have been an email, but I think meetings are really important to bring people on board, to bring people together and keep everybody in the loop on what's happening. A great example, we launched our website right at a year ago now, and there is never a good time to launch a website, right? It's always going to impact somebody negatively. And so we knew that that was the reality, but we sat down with our partners in admissions, our partners in records and registration, and said, okay, when is the best time for all of you? And, the folks overseeing registration as well, and said, when is the best time? And they all gave us their best times. We found about a 2-week window. But what we also found is that while we were able to find a window that worked relatively well for everybody, we also had partners that felt trusted and felt valued that we reached out and said, we want to hear from you. When are your no-go moments? When are your best moments? And what can you live with? And at the end of the day, outside of about 3 weeks, they found everybody said, look, we know this is important. We'll do what needs to be done. Because we took the time to meet with them, they saw that collaboration, they saw the value that we placed in them, and they were willing to suffer a little bit to help us out. And we ended up finding a really good time. I also think meetings are really important internally because they help our teams. Having that one-on-one conversation every week helps get feedback on something, helps us course correct before it comes an issue. Before it gets to that point, we can kind of manage it. But I also think as we're building strategy and building work with those key partners, having those internal conversations helps us to be better at that. Helps that leader to be able to say, okay, let's think about it from their perspective. Let's pause and think about this. And then one of the other things that we're looking at is maybe we adjust our staff meetings. Right now, we have a staff meeting every week and we have that kind of key critical time after updates. What if we did a staff meeting once a month, maybe the first or the last of the month, where we brought somebody in? I would love for our full team to learn more about the registration process, or a full team to learn more about how budget works for the institution, or how government relations works. When you start to see all those pieces together, it gives you really good context and helps you be a better strategic partner across the board. But the only way you do that is when you have a meeting that's planned with that kind of purpose. And so one-on-ones are great for that. Meetings about things that could be an issue before they become an issue, and then finding some learning time in your staff meeting. I also think as higher ed leaders, we have to be really good about focusing on outcomes, not outputs, outcomes. Too often we get in this task comes in, task goes out moment, inbox, outbox, and that's an output focus. We need to be better at outcomes focus. What's the impact? And our strategic plan is a great place to find a starting point of what should impact look like. So I would encourage you to look at your strategic plan and then look at your own tasks and figure out, are there ways that you can tie in to that outcome? And I want to give you an example here. So we got a very generous 7-figure gift to reopen a beloved planetarium on our campus that had been closed for almost 20 years. Everybody in the community talks about going to this planetarium on a school field trip. Like, it's an incredible thing. In terms of reach of this, just to give you context, when we shared the announcement that we were going to be reopening it, it did better than the social post of our dean's list. and our graduation list. Like, and those are usually your best performing content, right? All those kids want to share each other. That's how much this planetarium is loved on our campus. And we're bringing it back. And one of the things that this donor wanted to do was wanted to give students the opportunity to be involved. So students are creating the business plan to make it sustainable long term after that investment. Students are creating the art elements that go with it, so they're working on the logo. And when the advancement folks came to me and said, "This is the idea, here's what we're thinking," I think people might have been concerned that there was going to be some fear of Marcom going, "Oh, nope, we need to do that. It needs to look a correct way." And I helped our team reframe that to be an outcome. You know, what a cool opportunity for students. And so we put some things in place to give us some protection. So first, all of the students that were going to be designing this had to go and meet with us and learn about branding, learn about our official colors, our official fonts, all of those kinds of things. Then once they had their drafts done, they presented those and we got to look at those. We gave critique and feedback because that's a real thing that if you're a member of, an agency or working in graphic design, you're going to have to do. And then at the end, we've kind of picked some things that we're working and moving forward with. But we shifted our own focus to be an outcome, and that helped those students, but it also helped build collaboration because we had art working with advancement, working with our team, all in this project that at the end of the day is going to make an impact in our community. I got my APR certification from PRSA, and one of the things that I love that they do, it's called RPI, and it's research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And that's how they focus every project. This is my favorite kind of model because I think it's so beneficial. You're going to do some research. You're going to build a plan with some goals. What is the ultimate goal of the thing you're doing? Then you're going to implement it, and then you're going to evaluate it. All of a sudden, when we start doing things in this format, it makes such a difference. We're focused on the outcome, but we're also planning things that meet the goal. We had an event on our campus that was new this year. We got some dollars, and there was a cross-campus team brought together to create this event. And we sat down and we said, "What's the goal of this event? Is it just to have a fun event, or does it have a strategic purpose?" And we identified that strategic purpose. And then all of a sudden, that helped ground what we were planning. Were we doing activities and were we putting things in place that were going to help us meet that exact goal of who we wanted to come back? And then at the end, we were able to evaluate how we did on those goals. We did our stop, start, continue of the overall process, but we also made sure we met those goals. And I think this kind of approach helps us move from being great tacticianers and great executors to being that strategic thinker. Our teams are so great at executing. We know that, but it's flexing that strategic muscle, and RPI is a great tool to help do that. I also love to help articulate the why I'm making a change. What's the context? Why is this important? Because that also helps our team grow. We were working on a newsletter last week and somebody sent me the proposed order of stories. And I said, "Ooh, I would flip number one and number two." I knew exactly why to do that. And I said, "Let me explain to you why, and let me walk you through my thought process so that I can help teach them so that they're learning that and they can then apply that to future conversations." And speaking of future, we should always be learning, right? We never get there. We never arrive. There's always something new to learn. One of the things that our team has in our agenda is we have a complimentary professional development doc. Budgets are tight. We know that. So all of our different organizations, when we see great professional development opportunities, we drop that in how to register. So all of a sudden there is free professional development available at any given time for our team. All they have to do is just pick which session they want to go to. Super easy. These are no cost things, but it makes it easy to keep learning and keep knowing what's happening. I also talk a lot about going to conferences. And when our teams go to conferences, I encourage them, like, go to sessions that are going to be relevant to you. But if there's a time block, we've all seen it, right? There's nothing in that time block that really resonates. Go to something that's one of your partner areas. Go learn about athletics, or go learn about the registrar's office, or go learn about advancement, because then all of a sudden it helps us get that deeper vertical, right? So we're not just experts across our own area, but we become experts in that area that we partner with. And so that's really important. And then at conferences, one of the big things I tell people is you come back from a conference and you have all these great ideas, right? Your energy and enthusiasm is up here. And then your email, as your email loads and your email goes up, all of your energy and enthusiasm goes down. And so the way I try to help our team manage this is two, two, and one. Two ideas you can implement right now that you can get some easy wins, two ideas that you can do in 4 to 6 weeks, and one idea that you can work on over the next year. So two, two, and one. And I find that that helps us focus at the conference on what are things that we can apply, what are things that we can do that are going to make that impact, and that it helps us to continuously get better without coming back with all of these ideas and all of these different things and feeling the pressure to do it all. And then finally, I think it's really important as leaders that we provide opportunities for our teams to fail safely. One of the things as a Marcom leader that I had to learn for the first time in a leadership role is the budget. Nobody gives you pockets of money and lets you play. You have to kind of learn that in real time. And so one of the things I'm doing this year is I have a member of my team for one of our sub areas. She manages that budget. She had to put together a proposal for me of what she'd like to spend dollars on. We built that into the main Marcom budget. She has to report on it every month. She has to do all the follow-up. She has to do all the check-in. It's part of the main budget, so I'm oversight of it and I keep an eye on it. But the day-to-day work of that, she's doing it. It's one small part of our big budget, but what it does is it teaches her the process. It teaches her how to think about all the things and how to keep it in check. And at the end of the day, I'm right there. So if she misses something, I can swoop in and catch it. But it gives her opportunity so that down the road, when she has to manage a big budget, she's already gotten to do it a little bit. And so I think this is one of the really important things is find ways to let your team have new experiences so that they can fail safely. The first time I was in charge of budget, there was no safety net, and I got myself 5 figures over budget before I figured it out. So I that has galvanized in me, and I never want anybody else to experience that. So trying to find ways that people can safely fail is really, really important. Okay, number 9, be intentional about goals. This is a great collaboration tactic. So, our team is tasked with 2 to 3 goals. One of those goals has to be a partner goal, so something that's going to help one of those partners in that cross functional team they're part of. Then one has to be a personal goal that is something they've wanted to achieve or learn more about. And then one needs to be directly tied to their work. And I find those 3 goals really help keep us all accountable and keep us all focused on the same thing, helps build collaboration with those partners as we're, taking on new things or learning more. It helps us get better in our day-to-day work, but it also gives us the opportunity to learn something that we're curious about or passionate about. The reality, though, is all 3 goals have to in some way be rooted in that strategic plan. If they don't map to that, why are we doing them? Why do they exist? It should all go back to that plan. And then the thing I do is I put goals on my monthly checklist. So every month I'm talking to the team about where are you on your goals? What progress on your goals did you make this week? Our senior leadership team, we look at the strategic plan about every other week, and are checking and making sure we're continuing to move our parts of that. So it's my job as the leader to put it on everybody's agenda, but it's the team having opportunity to really go deeper and build that collaboration. And as many of our goals, as we know, as marketing and comms teams, we're change agents, right? So we're working with people across campus. So simply the act of keeping the strategic plan a top priority is naturally building that collaboration because anything we do, we don't do in isolation. We do it with our partners across campus. Okay, and the final thing that we're going to talk about before we open it up for questions is the idea that we got to make it fun. Life is hard, work is hard, and so one of the greatest things we can do is make the work fun. I had a team that was motivated by breakfast previously. They love caffeine and they love bacon. And so anytime our team would do something amazing or do something that we were really proud of, we would go to the local diner, drink copious amounts of coffee, eat all the bacon, and celebrate our success. And what I found is that when we did that, it helped the team, have that moment to celebrate, and then they would, put their heads down and work just as hard on the next thing because they felt appreciated and they felt seen. And we also do the same thing with our partners. When our partners have a major event, we've sent a lunch that day. We've ordered pizza for them, or we've sent, ice cream over afterwards and said, great job on the event, or we've sent some coffee delivery on the day of. So we've done some things to make sure that team feels celebrated and that we see them as well. I can tell you, you can fit 20 dozen boxes of donuts in a car. I know that because one time we took a dozen donuts to all of our campus partners and departments to say thanks for being their partnership, how sweet it was to work with them. So we have done some really intentional things to let campus know that we are celebrating them as well. We also have to do things that are fun. Our advancement team loves a good Halloween party. So there I am in the middle. I'm Daphne from Scooby-Doo, if you weren't sure. But it's important that we have fun and we celebrate. And so this morning, the morning of Halloween, everybody meets at advancement. We all have our costumes on. We take great pictures together, and then everybody goes about their day. But that's a fun thing that everybody can do to feel like they're part of the team and make it a little fun. And so that day across campus, you might see a Starbucks barista, you might see a priest, you might see a little bit of everybody, but it makes it fun, and the work is hard sometimes, and so we have to find ways to have fun. We also in our team start every team meeting with shout outs, and this is a moment for you to share what you've done that you're proud of, and also share what your team has done or what somebody else has done that they've helped you with or they've been successful. So it may be recognizing somebody that won an award, or it might be, hey, I survived a math test. Some of our student workers, that's what they share. Or it might be, hey, I want to shout out this partner on our campus because they did this amazing thing. And so it's really important that we build in that culture of sharing what's happening and sharing the success so that our teams feel appreciated, but we also try to find ways to do that across campus. And one of the ways that we do that is thank you notes. It takes just a couple of seconds to write a thank you note to your team. I try to write a couple of thank you notes every week. I've got two sitting on my desk that I wrote this morning. But it's really important that the work is hard and so that people feel appreciated. And so when we tell our teams, our cross-functional teams, when we tell others across campus, thank you for the partnership, the work, all of a sudden it makes them want to come back, right? If we're asking a lot of people and we never say thank you, that doesn't feel very rewarding or feel very fun for them to want to be a part of. So I think it's really important that we build that in as part of how we make the work fun. And in closing, I want to say there are days as you're trying to break down those silos and build collaboration that you feel like you were Superman or Superwoman, you were killing it, you were doing a great job. There are those days, and enjoy those days because they're really special and you're making progress. There are also days that you're going to feel like the biggest loser, that, you took 4 steps back for the one step that you started. And that happens, right? It's part of it. But the reality is if you stay with it, you can build collaboration and set your institution up for success. And that's going to help you make a big difference across your campuses. And so with that, I want to open it up for any questions.
Hey, thank you, Carrie. That was an incredible presentation. I was really excited about it, and I had several takeaways on my own end. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of exciting questions that people have on their mind. I know one was dropped in the chat earlier by Virginia. And Virginia,
Yeah.
I'm actually going to I'm going to allow you to talk for a second. You're welcome to come off mute. I know it was a while back, so if you want to add any additional context to your question or whatnot, but you should be able to speak now if you want to ask your question to Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Virginia. Nice to meet you.
You too. That was a really great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm just curious. You mentioned in these meetings that you have with the four
Yeah.
A's that your team. You mentioned we. So I was just
Yes.
curious who from your team goes to these meetings and who's invited.
Yeah. Great question. So we have the cross-functional team model, and so that looks a little bit different for each of those teams, but we have, a member of our Marcom, we've got a member of the marketing creative services folks, we have a member of web, and we have a member of our communications that are in every single one of those teams. So one member of our team may be assigned to the advancement cross-functional team. Another member of the team would might go to the admissions team. But at every one of those 10 teams, we have 3 to 4 marketing and comms folks that are attending all within different areas of that marketing and comm function so that things keep moving, we keep making progress. But that there's also somebody, if they have a need for a press piece, we've got somebody that has that expertise, or we've got somebody that has the expertise around design, so that we can really meet all of their needs right then and there. Great question.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks, Virginia, for your question. Um, if anyone else has questions too, you can either drop it in the chat or you can just say, I have a question, and I'll let you come off mute like
Yeah.
Virginia and ask it live. I know I don't know if you saw Carrie, but Kenny found some of the stuff that you were saying kind of earlier in the presentation very relatable and had some
Wonderful.
context to that. Kenny, curious, did you have any questions or want to add anything to that for the discussion? And I can let's see.
No, I don't think so. This is excellent, Carrie. I
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much. I guess I do have one question. What
Yeah.
size is your team? Like how
Yes.
many team members do you have?
Great question. So we are hiring our final position, and when we have that hired, we will have 15 people on our team. I have also done this same kind of cross-functional team model with about 7 members
Hmm.
at a prior institution. So I've done it both sides of that. When I started here, we were closer to about 12. We've had some opportunities across campus. There were some folks that were in comm roles that were kind of spread across campus, and our provost is a fantastic advocate for the work of marketing and comms. And so, as there's been attrition in those roles, we've brought those in to kind of help give us a little bit more deeper bench to make sure that we're supporting the campus as a whole. Great
That's
question.
great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
You still have time to carry. Do you want me to? There was one other
Yeah,
question from a colleague that might be relevant for folks, just about
sure.
how you kind of balance being an enrollment partner, but also a change leader at the institution, and and
Yeah.
and as well as kind of like a strategist, right, across the institution. So
Yeah, I will be honest. This is an area that's tough for me. You know, there is a natural tendency to want to be in all the things and be in all the conversations. And so part of what I have really internally tried to work on is those tiers and making sure that we are providing that kind of top tier service to those 4 A's. And then we have on-demand design solutions. We have a Marcom Academy where we teach, how to take photos and video on your iPhone and how to edit your website, some of those things to partners that maybe don't quite get that same level of care, but to still make sure they have the resources that they need. And so that's something that I've tried to do. And then I think from the change agent and that strategic piece, I spend a ton of time reading. I spend a ton of time out of the office, wanting to make sure that I am connecting with folks in our community, connecting with donors, connecting with other folks across the division. I meet with the deans every single month, trying to make sure that that I'm thinking at the 70, 80,000, and then I have a senior leadership team that handles a lot of the day-to-day of some of this work so that I can be helping to really drive us in the right direction. And they are the ones and they do a phenomenal job, but they're the folks that, check the press release. I may help drive what that message needs to look like, but they're the person that checks that writer to make sure there aren't too many typos or to make sure that kind of thing. And they're the person that gives feedback on the day-to-day of a design project or a color of, if we're trying to give a giveaway or what have you. So that senior leadership team has been really important for me. I didn't have that. That's relatively recent. And I was honestly burning the candle at both ends, trying to be that strategic person out and about, helping make sure we were focused on the right things. But then at the same time, I would come back into the office and my team needed me and I wasn't doing a good job of both. So we've kind of reframed that a little bit and trying to work through that as kind of the next iteration of our org chart.
Carrie, I also actually have a question. I know that
Sure.
you're still in the process, but going back to the planetarium, you said that you had students
Yeah.
help out with some of the marketing strategy and stuff. I was curious if that was the first time that you've leveraged students for marketing, and then if it's going well, and if you think that if you're going to do this in the future going forward.
Yeah, great question. So it is not the first time, but it's the first time we've done it to this scale. So we have the Chancellor's Holiday Card. We've worked with art students several times to do it when we have our Board of Visitors on our campus. Or Board of Trustees, rather, excuse me, every single year we've worked with students to design a very custom gift for our Board of Trustees members. So we've used them in very small scale kinds of micro moments, and that has worked really well. And I think we had some lessons from working in that about the iterative process that we were able to apply to this. And I think it's going well. I think there will be opportunities to do even more of this in the future. And I think it's something we should be. Our job, yes, it's a change agent, but at the end of the day, the institution is about giving students relatable, relative skills. And so I think that's really important to be focused on and helping make sure that we're providing those opportunities. And so, we're in conversation with how can we add more interns into the office. That gives us a deeper bench, but it also gives those folks really valuable skills. So yes to projects, yes to more projects. And we learn something every time we do it and we get better at it.
Gary, we just had a really great one dropped in the chat by
Yeah.
Deborah. She was asking if your team is housed within a specific division like advancement, and if so, how you kind of balance some of those priorities between philanthropy and other items you mentioned. Deborah, I'll
Yeah.
let you come off mute if you want to add anything. You're more than welcome to, or if you want to kind of state your own question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it really just goes back to we see a lot of universities push for marketing communications to sit at an executive level within
Hmm.
higher ed. And then we also see several universities who have their marketing and communications under whether it's a student affairs or a,
Yeah.
a division like that, advancement, or so on. And so just curious how your university handles it and how you've seen it work.
Yeah. So I'll back up. I've been in higher ed marketing and comms for almost 20 years. So let's not do any math on that, as to how old I am. But in that time, I've been housed in the Office of the President, the Office of Enrollment Management, the Office of Student Affairs, the Office of Advancement, um, and under the chief of staff. So I've been in 5 different locations. So about every 3 to 4 years, it seems like the org chart changes. And I think that's, pretty standard across the industry of there's a lot of conversation about where it lives. At UA Little Rock, it's a little bit different model. So we are under advancement. However, I work very closely with the chief of staff and very closely with the chancellor, often on direct priorities. And I think that works here because of the people involved. We have a lot of trust with each other. We have set up some kind of best practices about what everybody needs to know and be looped in on. And that works really well that we're able to take those institutional priorities and really make sure those are focused at the same time those philanthropic needs are. And I think for me, it really goes back to the 4As. I spend a lot of time talking to everybody across campus about these are the areas that, athletics, or excuse me, advancement and admissions, those are both reputational pieces, right? Or revenue pieces. I said that wrong. These are revenue pieces. Like we're a revenue driven institution because we need enrollment. So that's a perfect place that we have to be a focus and we have to prioritize both of those. At the same time, athletics is a reputation driver. The main way a lot of people learn about your institution is through athletics. And so athletics has to be a priority there. And then at the end of the day, academics is really important too. It's the product, right? And I know that the 4 Ps of marketing is probably not popular to call it a product, but at the end of the day, like the academic component of what we do is the product that we have to offer. And so it has to be a priority. And so I think I continually frame things like that those core areas have to be the focus, and it's just being continually talking through that. And then the other piece of it is if we're not doing something for another area, that doesn't just mean they're out of luck. And that's part of what we've really worked to build that bench through on-demand design templates, through the Marcom Academy, and giving them resources and tools to be able to do the work. Because it's not acceptable to just say, "Oh, you're not one of the 4As, sorry about you." Like that's not going to work either. And so we've had to find a way to balance, and that's kind of how we're able to stay focused on those top 4 priorities. Is because A, we're able to continually talk about that, but B, we also have some options available for folks that aren't in that area, so they still get what they need when they need it. All right. Well, I am told we're running out of time for questions. So here's where you can find me and stay in touch. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Carrie H. Phillips. You can always shoot me an email, cphillips@ualr.edu. And of course, my website and carrieon.com. Thank you again for being here today. And I hope you have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks everybody for participating. Join us tomorrow for a session that's going to be led by the University of Reno Agriculture School. We are going to be having a journey to unlocking hidden revenue with rooms. So it'll be a fun session. Thank you again, Carrie. This was incredible. I know that there was a lot of people excited about what you shared, and we can't thank you enough for participating.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, y'all.